Before we begin, I kindly ask that you take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay connected with the latest stories we bring to you. It was one of those rare evenings when time seems to slow and the world falls into a quiet harmony. The kind of evening where you feel that everything in your life has settled into a rhythm that, despite its simplicity, carries a deep sense of peace. My husband, Tom, and I had been together for nearly 25 years. Over the years, we had developed a routine so ingrained it felt like breathing. Predictable, yes, but not without its own quiet form of joy. It wasn't that excitement had vanished from our relationship, not at all. But life, with all its small challenges, had entwined us in a bond that felt as natural as waking up every morning. Tom was my anchor, the one person who could see the world through my eyes and understand me with a depth that no one else could. But on this particular evening, everything I thought I knew about our connection, about myself, began to tremble on the edge of uncertainty. It was a Friday, and our home felt warm and inviting, the soft hum of the dishwasher blending with the quiet ambiance of the evening. Candlelight danced against the walls, casting shadows that whispered of comfort. We were enjoying a small dinner at home, just the three of us, Tom, myself, and Steve. Steve was Tom's childhood friend, a constant presence in our lives, someone whose place in our world was as unshakable as the ground beneath our feet. Steve had always possessed a unique quality about him. There was a calmness, a stillness in his energy, yet it carried an intensity that made you feel as though you were the only person in the room when he spoke. Over the years, I had come to see him as family. His presence felt as naturally as our own. But Tonight there was something different in the air, a subtle shift, an unspoken change that tugged at the edges of my consciousness, pulling my attention in ways I couldn't quite understand. Tom, the life of every gathering, always filled the room with his laughter, his jokes, his ability to lighten any atmosphere. In contrast, Steve had a quieter nature, a reserved demeanor that still held power. But tonight, as I looked across the dinner table at Steve, something felt off, an unfamiliar sense of tension that I could not dismiss. I tried to push the feeling aside, attributing it to the wine, the atmosphere, the comfort of the evening. Yet, as the night unfolded, I could feel it, the subtle undercurrent of something unspoken. It wasn't a loud disagreement or an obvious clash of opinions. No, it was far quieter than that. It was in the way Steve occasionally glanced at me, his eyes holding a depth that was more than just familiar. There was something in them, a question, a thought, an acknowledgement, that unsettled me. I glanced at Tom, who seemed oblivious to this change. His attention was lost in the casual flow of the evening, his mind more focused on his phone than the conversation at hand. I began to wonder, was I imagining things? Or was there something, some quiet shift happening beneath the surface of our lives that neither of us had noticed before? And then it came, the moment that would forever alter the course of that evening. We had just finished dessert, a rich chocolate mousse that was Tom's favorite, and the conversation had slowed. The warmth of the evening hung in the air, and for a brief moment, everything felt still, as though the world had paused. And then Steve spoke. His voice was low, but firm, carrying a weight that made me pause mid-sip of my wine. "You know," Steve said, looking directly at me, "I've always thought you were more than just Tom's wife." I froze. The glass of wine lingered in my hand, suddenly feeling much heavier. Tom, lost in his phone, hadn't heard it, but I felt Steve's words settle in the space between us, like an undeniable truth. His gaze lingered on mine, a moment longer than usual, as if searching for something. There was a flicker in his eyes, a quiet recognition, an unspoken understanding that seemed to reach beyond the room, beyond our shared history. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady, even though my heart raced, my mind tumbling through 1,000 thoughts, none of which felt right. Steve leaned back in his chair, tapping his wine glass lightly. "I don't know how to explain it," he said with a half smile. "It's just that there's always been this connection between us, don't you think?" I looked over at Tom, silently hoping for some reassurance, some grounding force. but he was still absorbed in his phone, completely unaware of the weight of the moment unfolding before me. It felt like time had slowed, like I was standing on the edge of something, uncertain whether to step forward or retreat into the comfort of what I had always known. Steve's words hung in the air, and I struggled to find the right response. Was it something I could simply ignore, or did it demand recognition? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't mean it like that," Steve quickly added, sensing the discomfort in my eyes. "It's not like I've ever wanted anything. It's just that I've always respected you, really seen you. You're not just a wife, or a mother, or a caretaker. You are you." His words settled around me like a gentle breeze, and in that moment, a veil seemed to lift. What had always been there, hidden beneath the layers of routine and labels, was now exposed. A raw truth, an acknowledgement of who I was, beyond all the roles I had played. I had always defined myself as Tom's wife, the one who supported him, who held everything together. But hearing Steve say that, hearing him strip away those labels and see me as me, it shook something deep inside. For a moment, there was silence. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for me to respond. But before I could, Tom's voice broke through the stillness, distant and unaware, as though the moment had passed him by completely. In that silence, I realized something fundamental. Sometimes, the most important truths are the ones we are not ready to hear. "What's going on? You two look so serious. Let's play something, huh? Maybe a round of cards," said Tom's voice cut through the tension, his words light-hearted, attempting to bridge the silence that had settled between us. I smiled weakly, my heart still pounding in my chest, the heaviness of the night's conversation hanging over me. Steve turned to Tom, nodding in agreement, but his eyes, those eyes that had laid bare something so intimate, lingered on me for just a moment longer. In that fleeting silence, I felt it. A connection, a spark, something unexpected but undeniable. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. We played cards, we laughed, we spoke of trivial matters, the kind of conversations that come with familiarity. But beneath it all, there was a shifting, a subtle transformation in the air. I could feel it, even if it was unspoken, a shared understanding that something between us had changed. As the evening wound down and Tom and Steve said their goodbyes, I found myself standing at the door, watching them leave, the sound of their footsteps fading into the night. I turned back into the house, but it didn't feel the same. It felt as if I had just stepped off the edge of something unfamiliar, something unknown. The night wasn't over for me. It had only just begun. The next morning I woke up with a strange sense of unease. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted while I was sleeping, and I had missed it. I had always prided myself on being the one who had control over my emotions, my thoughts, my life. I was the calm one, the one who anchored everything. But now I felt unmoored, caught in a tide I didn't know how to navigate. Steve's words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a quiet mantra, digging deeper into my thoughts. "You're not just a wife, a mother, or a caretaker. You are you." It was a simple sentence, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. It felt like an unspoken confession, as though he had seen something in me that I had long been blind to. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it simply a compliment, or was there something deeper beneath it? Why did it feel so significant? I had always defined myself by the roles I played: Tom's wife, a mother, a caretaker. But in that moment, it felt like Steve was offering me something more, something beyond the comfortable limits I had placed on myself. It felt dangerous, fragile, yet alive with possibility. I rolled over in bed, glancing at Tom beside me. He was still asleep, his expression peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I didn't want to disturb him. He was always so calm in the morning, so grounded. I admired that about him, how effortlessly he navigated life. But me? I was tangled in thoughts, confused by the whirlwind of emotions that had been set in motion the night before. I tried to shake it off, to push the thoughts back into the corners of my mind. I had a day ahead of me, and there was no room for lingering doubts or fantasies. But the more I focused on the mundane tasks, making coffee, preparing breakfast, the more the weight of what had happened settled in. I found myself replaying Steve's words, analyzing them, trying to decipher his intentions. But no matter how much I rationalized it, the feeling of his gaze lingered, like a memory etched into my skin. As the morning passed, I couldn't escape the thought that something had shifted between Steve and me. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a recognition of something deeper, something I had never allowed myself to fully acknowledge. A part of me wondered if Steve had seen a side of me that I hadn't even noticed, a side that had been buried beneath years of routine, responsibility, and expectations. But it was more than that, wasn't it? It was the way he looked at me, the way his words had shifted in meaning, the way I saw myself in that moment. I felt seen in a way that I hadn't in years, and that feeling, that realization terrified me. Around noon, I reached for my phone and decided to call my sister Karen. She always had a way of cutting through the confusion, of offering the kind of clarity I so desperately needed, even when everything felt like a tangled mess. I needed to talk about it, to get it off my chest. But as I picked up the phone, I hesitated. How do you tell someone that your husband's best friend has made you feel something you didn't expect? Hello, Karen's voice rang through the receiver, warm and familiar. Hey, it's me, I said, my voice tight with the weight of the words I wasn't sure how to say. I need to talk. What's going on? Her tone shifted immediately, filled with concern. And so, in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes, the hardest conversations to have are the ones we need the most, the ones that force us to look at ourselves in ways we've been avoiding. But perhaps, in the end, it is only by embracing these moments of discomfort that we can begin to uncover the deeper truths about who we really are. You sound off. What happened? I took a deep breath, unsure where to start. It's Steve, Tom's friend last night. He said something that, I don't know how to explain it, but it's been bucking me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Karen spoke slowly. What did he say? I closed my eyes, the words coming back to me with surprising clarity. He said, I wasn't just Tom's wife, that he saw me for who I really am, not just a wife or a mother. What me? Karen was silent for a moment, processing what I had said. That's a strange thing to say, especially if it wasn't in some kind of joking way. I don't know, I replied, shaking my head. Even though she couldn't see it, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like he was seeing me in a way that no one has in a long time, not even Tom. And it hit me, you know. I don't know what to do with that. Karen let out a soft sigh. Look, I don't know what's going on with Steve, but I do know this. You are your own person. And sometimes when you've been in a relationship for as long as you have, it's easy to forget that, to lose yourself in the roles of being a wife, a mother, to lose the parts of you that made you before all of that. I don't want to lose that, I said quietly, the weight of her words sinking in, but I didn't expect it to come from him. It feels like I'm suddenly seeing myself through someone else's eyes, and it's unsettling. Maybe it's time to take a step back. Karen suggested not to make any decisions yet, but to just give yourself some space to think. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just let it breathe for a bit. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, her advice made sense, but it didn't make the feelings go away. I'll try. Thanks, Karen. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone, feeling both comforted and more confused than before. It was clear I needed to sort through my emotions, to really sit with what had happened and what it meant, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was about to change. As the day wore on, I found myself thinking about Steve more than I should have. His words, his look, everything about him seemed to have gotten under my skin. I told myself that I was just overthinking it, that it was nothing more than a fleeting moment, but deep down I knew it was more than that. The question lingered in the air. Was this a sign of something I needed to confront, or was I just imagining things that night? When Tom came home, I didn't know how to look at him. How could I tell him that I was struggling with something that didn't involve him at all but still felt like it might? How could I bring up Steve without it sounding strange? So I did what I always did. When things felt too complicated, I buried it. I smiled, kissed him on the cheek, and pretended like everything was just as it should be. But as the night wore on, I knew that I couldn't keep pretending forever. The shift was there hanging in the air between us, and it wasn't going to disappear on its own. I just didn't know what to do about it yet. The days after that night were filled with an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, like the quiet hum of electricity just beneath the surface of everything I did. I went through my usual routines, making dinner, picking up after Tom, checking in with the kids. On the outside, nothing had changed, but inside something was stirring, something that I didn't fully understand, but couldn't push away. It was the way Steve's words had started to shape my thoughts. I'm more than just a wife. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and each time I saw Tom, I felt this strange sense of distance, as if there was a wall between us that hadn't been there before. It wasn't that I loved him any less. It was that something in me had awakened something that had been dormant for years. The hardest part was that I wasn't sure how to talk about it. How do you tell your husband that someone else's words made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? How do you admit that you were seeing yourself differently, even though the world around you stayed the same? I decided to call Steve. The thought of it made my stomach flutter, but I couldn't let this go on any longer if I was going to make sense of what had happened. I needed to confront it. I dialed his number. My hand is shaking slightly as the phone rang. "Hello," Steve's voice answered on the other end. "Steve, it's Karen," I lied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I had no idea why I said it, but in that moment, I needed to hide behind something, behind the illusion of normalcy. "Karen, what's up?" He replied, a bit surprised, but not suspicious. I just wanted to check in, see how you were doing. How's everything?" There was a pause on the line, as if Steve was wondering greatest was going. "Everything's good. Work's busy. You know how it is. But I'm guessing you didn't call just to ask how I was. What's going on? Really?" His voice was kind but firm, as if he knew there was more beneath the surface. I swallowed hard. I've been thinking about something you said the other night." I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "When you told me I wasn't just Tom's wife, that I was something more." There was another long silence, and I could hear Steve's breath on the other end, steady. "And even I didn't mean to make things awkward," he said softly, his voice quieter now, almost as if he was choosing his words carefully. "But I meant what I said. You are more than that, Karen. You always have been." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of emotion rush through me. The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I wasn't sure what I had expected, maybe for him to apologize or to brush it off. But instead he was acknowledging something. I'd never let myself fully accept that I was worthy of being seen for who I truly was. "I don't know what to do with that," I confess, my voice trembling. It's been bothering me, Steve. It's like I've been living in this role for so long that I've forgotten who I really am, who I was before all of this." "Karen, I don't want to complicate things for you," Steve said gently, his voice steady but full of concern. "I am not saying anything to make you feel uncomfortable, but I've known you for a long time, and I've always admired you, not just as Tom's wife, but as you, the person you are. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're defined by just one thing. You deserve more than that." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was strange, comforting but also unsettling. How could something so simple be so profound? I've been so focused on everyone else, on being everything for everyone, that I forgot about myself. I whispered more to myself than to him. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, Steve. I don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything right now," Steve said, his voice softening. "Take your time. Just don't ignore what you're feeling. Don't bury it." I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Steve. I think I needed to hear that." We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call staring at the phone in my hand, the weight of the conversation still settling around me. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. I hadn't expected to feel so raw, so exposed, but I also knew that Steve's words had unlocked something inside me, something I couldn't ignore any longer. The next day I decided to talk to Tom. I had avoided it for as long as I could, but the longer I held on to this secret, the harder it became to look him in the eyes. I had to be honest with him, not just for the sake of our marriage, but for myself. We were sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, the quiet hum of the morning settling over us. Tom looked up from his newspaper, sensing the shift in the air. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. I set my cup down, my hands suddenly trembling. "I need to talk to you about something." Tom put his paper down and leaned in, his full attention now on me. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "It's about Steve. He said something to me the other night, something that's been bothering me ever since." Tom's face tightened, the mention of his best friend immediately putting him on alert. "What did he say?" "He said that I'm not just Tom's wife, that I'm more than that." I paused, trying to gauge Tom's reaction. It's not that I'm upset with him, but it made me realize something. I've spent so many years being just a wife and mother that I've forgotten who I am outside of that, and I don't know what to do with that. Tom was silent for a long moment. The look on his face was one I couldn't quite place. Confusion, concern, and maybe a touch of hurt. "I never meant for you to feel like you were just a wife," he said finally, his voice low. "But if I'm being honest, I've been so focused on everything else, work, the kids, that I've forgotten to ask how you're doing, to check in with you. Maybe I've been taking you for granted, Karen." The honesty in his voice cut through the tension, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't the response I had feared. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare glimpse into the man I'd shared my life with. And in that moment, I realized that I didn't just need to rediscover myself. I needed to rediscover us. The days that followed were a blur of small, what significant changes. Tom and I had an honest conversation about everything, about our marriage, our roles, and what we wanted moving forward. We didn't have all the answers, but we did have something we hadn't had in a long time: a renewed sense of understanding and respect for one another. There were no grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but it felt like we were starting over in a way. I wasn't just Tom's wife anymore. I was Karen, a woman with her own identity, desires, and dreams. Tom and I found ourselves talking more, really talking about things that had once seemed too trivial or difficult to discuss. We laughed, we cried, and we faced the uncomfortable truths we'd both been avoiding. There were moments of tension, yes, but there were also moments of deep connection that made it all worthwhile. We were learning how to be a team again, not just in name, but in spirit. One evening, about a week after our conversation, I decided to take a walk. I needed some space to think, to process everything that had happened in such a short time. The evening air was cool, the sky painted in shades of pink and purple as the sun set. As I walked through the quiet neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settling over me. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted, even if only for a moment. I found myself walking by the old park where Tom and I had spent many afternoons in our young years, sitting on the swings, talking about our hopes for the future. It felt strange, yet comforting to be back here alone, without the noise of the daily life. As I sat on the swing, I let my mind wander. I'm more than just a wife. I'm more than just a mother. I am Karen, whole and complete, with all my imperfections, my desires, my dreams. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in a long time, they felt true. There was no shame in them, no guilt, just acceptance. I thought about Steve, about how his words had unsettled me at first, but how they had ultimately opened my eyes to something I had been neglecting for far too long. I didn't need to rely on anyone else to define me. I was enough just as I was. I wasn't angry with Steve. On the contrary, I felt gratitude. He had unknowingly helped me see that I had been putting myself second for too long, and now it was time for me to step into my own light. As the evening grew darker, I stood up from the swing and headed back home. I felt lighter, freer, like I was walking toward a new chapter of my life, one where I wasn't afraid to embrace who I truly was. When I walked through the door, Tom was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. His face lit up when he saw me, and I knew without a doubt that this was the man I had chosen. The man I loved. And yet I also knew that I had chosen myself in a way I hadn't before. We didn't need to say anything at that moment. Words weren't necessary. The quiet understanding between us spoke volumes. I had found my own way, and he had found his place beside me, supporting me in ways he never had before. "I'm home," I said softly, my voice full of a new strength. Tom stood up, walked over, and took my hand in his. "I know," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I can see it." And in that moment, I realized that the real change wasn't just in me. It was in us. We had learned to grow together, not apart. We have learned that love wasn't just about fulfilling roles or expectations. It was about mutual respect, support, and the courage to face the truths that lay beneath the surface. "I love you," I whispered, and it wasn't just the words I had said 1,000 times before. This time it meant something more. "I love you too," Tom replied, pulling me into a gentle embrace. As I stood there in his arms, I understood, now more than ever, true growth comes from embracing who you are, from being honest with yourself and with those you love. And while life might not always go as planned, sometimes the most unexpected moments, like a conversation with a friend or a simple, honest reflection, can change everything for the better. And so, as we moved forward together, I knew that we were beginning something new. Not a new chapter in the traditional sense, but a new understanding, a new respect, and most importantly, a new love, one that was based on who we were, not who we thought we should be. And I knew deep down that we'd be okay, more than okay. We'd be stronger together and apart because we finally learned to embrace the person we truly were.